Gets around and and Philadelphia has it.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show, live here on exclusively on the DSM Media YouTube channel today. If you guys are new to the channel, first and foremost, make sure to check us out on Twitter first at DSM_media. Hit that follow button. We greatly appreciate it. And while you're over on the Twitter page, make sure to check out the link tree in our bio. It will take you to every social media platform. We are available on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff. But if you guys want to catch today's show, any of our pregame lives, or be interactive throughout any of the shows here at DSM, make sure you check out the YouTube link specifically. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, it is the best way to get your thoughts, comments, and questions pulled up here on the screen with us, like my man Brett. And happy birthday.
Happy birthday, brother
Brett here. Enjoy it, brother. How old are you turning? And if you don't want to tell us, don't tell us, but just wondering.
Yeah, it's okay. You can tell us by how many years you've seen the Sixers losing the playoffs.
There you go. We'll do the math for you. It might not be too quick, but we'll do the math for you. I'm one half of your host here, Dylan Davis. You can find me on Twitter at DylanJD98. To my right, my faithful co-host Scotty. You can find him as well at Scotty Drowned. JT hits for the cycle. Phil scored 15 runs last night. Doc Rivers goes on a very familiar podcast. And we have Would You Rather Wednesday today, Scotty. So we got a lot to dive into. But before we get to our Would You Rather Wednesday, presentation for everybody, let's start with the headlines that broke yesterday morning. Doc Rivers, former head coach of our beloved 76ers, joins none other than Celtics fan Bill Simmons podcast, former Celtics head coach. For Celtics fan, Bill Simmons, and they get to talking about Doc's tenure here in Philadelphia, and he said, a lot of interesting things in that stretch. So I'm going to let you get to it in a moment here, but he talked about James Harden, and he talked about how difficult it could be to coach James Harden at times. He talked about Joel Embiid and how he thinks that Joel Embiid needs to make everyone around him better and might need another alpha on the floor next to him. He talked about Elton Brand and why Doc Rivers himself was brought to Philadelphia to change the winning culture, which, he just did so spectacularly well, Scotty, in his 3 years here. What stood out to you the most? What either pissed you off or made you step back and say, wow, thank God Nick Nurse is here and this loser is out of this town? What stood out to you about Doc Rivers in this interview?
Yeah, there was a lot. So just overall, what stood out to me from the interview itself, the dude is just so full of himself, man. Like he like really thinks very highly of himself. He talks in this manner as if he knows exactly what it takes to win championships. He knows exactly. And mind you, he's won a championship. We get it. 10 plus years ago, right?
Mike McCarthy has a championship, if that means anything to you.
Sitting here acting like he knows what it takes and like he makes all the right moves. And he talked about James Harden very specifically as if he had no part in kind of bringing James Harden in and molding the team to James Harden to an extent, right? Like, obviously it's Joel Embiid's team, but it sounds like from Doc's perspective now, right? Like we heard the tidbits from Harden's side where he just wants to be himself, but then you hear from Doc's side how they've basically disagreed for a lot of the time about how things should be done. So it's almost like, how many stars has he done this with, right? Like, did he do this with Paul George and Kawhi in LA?
I'm so glad you said that because Paul George on a podcast, a clip came out just late last night that I was watching of Paul George talking about Doc Rivers in the past and about how Doc used him kind of like in a JJ Redick role with a lot of pin downs and coming off screens. And he's like, and PG's like, I can do it, but it's not my game. So like
Yeah.
Doc using another star in his tenure at another team.
Restricting him to that role, right? Like Paul George and JJ Redick, they're not the same players, right? So like that's malpractice.
That's
in
what it
itself.
takes to win.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Yes, and I'm glad you said that because that was the one thing that I think got kind of looked over. If you didn't listen to the pod, you wouldn't even hear the arrogance in it. But you see all the clips coming out of the talk about Harden, the talk about Embiid. What pissed me off was hearing him talk about the Denver Nuggets and talk about the Miami Heat and what it takes to get to the finals and how these teams got to the finals, right? It pisses me off hearing him talk like that, talking about, Bruce Brown buying into his role and believing in the coach, and Aaron Gordon buying into his role and believing in the coach and recognizing who he is, right? So I take that and then I look at the Sixers and I think, how many guys did you try to tell like that they want to do something that they think would work?
Right.
You don't even let them try it. You force them into what you want them to do and what you think wins. And we just go from there and we see what happens in and out every single postseason. And it was just funny hearing him talk about teams that are actually winning or a team that actually won the NBA championship because, simply put, he wouldn't do the things that Mike Malone is doing out in Denver. He's not taking Michael Porter Jr. out and putting Bruce Brown in and letting that go in the NBA Finals, right? Like, he would never do that. He would never put Christian Brown in Game 3 to get that surge at the end of the game.
And then stick with him. Stick with
him.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have done these things. So it's just funny hearing him talk as if he knew that Denver could turn into that. He knows what Jokic is and how to get the most out of him. And it was just funny, man, because what that podcast overall sounded like, aside from, that and the James Harden hate and the relationship with Joel Embiid and how he explained that. And it sounded like it was like his out, like he's done in the NBA. Like he was coming out and letting it all out, because there's certain things that he said in this interview where it's like, how does he become a head coach of a basketball team?
Who wants to play for him moving forward?
Who wants to play for this?
This is what is said about them after his time is up in that city, right? Or
and
with that player.
One last thing, I'll pass it back to you after this. But he talked about Joel Embiid and how he had to kind of mold Joel Embiid in a sense to get him to want to play every night. There was something about, Doc Rivers having to go to Joel Embiid, combat him on load management, and get him out on the court to play more games in the season. It's interesting. I don't know if that's an indictment on Joel Embiid. If it's true, right, it could be very well true. We see the mopiness.
Or it's just ironic because we want the opposite. Like, it's not like we only want Joel playing 60 games. It's not that we want Joel only playing 60 games a year, but we also want load management when it comes to Joel Embiid specifically, and we want him to get to the finish line, which is the postseason, healthy and ready to go, and not playing 48 minutes in a double OT game against Charlotte in December. Like, those types of nights, like, we just don't need. So it's just funny that he was technically wrong on that point of view as well. Man, the ego is just out of this world, and it just kind of amplifies everything we thought just about the lack of adjustments and when he would speak to the media after tough losses and things like that. There's no self-awareness. There's no self-accountability when it comes to Doc Rivers, man. It is listen, he's no longer the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. He's on a very large podcast. He's able to speak freely and speak his mind. But to just throw James Harden under the bus like that, and listen, it was very clear that their relationship was strained.
He did it with Ben Simmons too. Like, as much as we dislike Ben Simmons and hate Ben Simmons, Doc Rivers added on to the crumbling down of Ben Simmons' mental health, like literally.
Sure. No, I agree. But like, so the James Harden thing was the most specific. The Embiid thing I thought was interesting because he talks about not only the load management aspect, but how he needs another alpha next to him, and how he, I guess, basically calling him out because he's not involved enough off the court with his teammates, it seemed like, which was, I thought, very interesting. Like, you know, I do get that, but that's just, Joel's been that way since 2014 when he came in the league. Joel has a son. Joel has a wife. Like, he doesn't go out and party. He's not going to be at the club with James Harden. Like, is Joel and Furkan Korkmaz going to be hanging out off the court? Like, do they have a ton in common? I don't know. So, like, that part was weird to me. The ego thing, the lack of the lack of self accountability from Doc Rivers is astonishing, man. But it's just I keep going back to your point about the arrogance of what it takes to win in a lot of his comments. Doc Rivers has won championship, and I know how hard it is to win, and I know how many really good head coaches have never brought home any hardware. So I get what I'm about to say is a little contradicting, but he has one ring to show for how many years of coaching in this association?
With how many superstars?
Yeah. As if he doesn't have an historically bad track record when up in a series.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, James Harden's had his playoff struggles. Joel Embiid's never been out of the second round. Those narratives will continue. But Doc Rivers' narrative, if he's no longer a coach, Doc Rivers' narrative as a head coach will not be that he won a championship with Rajon Rondo and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen.
No.
His narrative is going to be how many 3-1 and 3-2 leads he blew and how many game sevens he lost as a head coach. Doc Rivers hasn't won a championship, hasn't been in a championship in over a decade and a half. So maybe, Doc, maybe, just maybe, that style, that brand of winning basketball you know oh so much about doesn't cut it anymore. So here's my question, Scotty. Yeah. We're so focused on this Boston series because it's recent. It just happened. And yeah, you can point to James Harden's struggles throughout it. And yeah, you can point to Game 7, Joel Embiid. You can point to a specific player in Game 7, but what was the reasoning for Game 7 against the Hawks in his first year when they were the 1 seed?
Right.
That was all because Ben Simmons played so poorly.
Right.
You were at home against a completely under-talented, inferior team to yours, and you lost that Game 7 at home. What was that about?
That was your typical Doc Rivers. Your typical Doc Rivers. When I said that he wouldn't do the things that Mike Malone did in the NBA Finals and throughout the playoffs, because believe it or not, Bruce Brown was not in the lineup. He was playing minimal minutes for a few game stretch there in the playoffs, brought him back strong in the NBA Finals and went back to him. It's funny because in that Atlanta series, that is the epitome of Doc Rivers. All of it. Literally, your star
the Game 5,
Ben Simmons crumbling down, right? You're doing the hack-a-bin in game, and Doc doesn't do anything to stop it. Literally, Maxey comes in, gives you a spark in a game. Shake comes in that series, gives you a spark in a game. Neither of those guys get run over Ben Simmons. You would rather have him out there diminishing his confidence at the free throw line. We watched them crumble down at home with a 26-point lead. So you see the epitome of Doc Rivers just in that series alone. The first season with the 76ers. It is actually insane to think about it in hindsight because you got the meltdown, the playing from above and then falling behind. You got that part. You got the part where he doesn't trust the young guys over the veteran and Ben Simmons. You wouldn't give Maxey any run. If Maxey
Jordan.
Look at Tyrese Maxey now. If Tyrese Maxey gets run in that Atlanta Hawks series, similar to what he did against the Washington Wizards in that playoff stretch, maybe, just maybe, we beat the Atlanta Hawks and go to the Eastern Conference Finals that season. It's as simple as that. You can't look back in hindsight and regrets and all this.
No, but that's on him. It's on one person. It ain't on Tyrese Maxey because Tyrese Maxey didn't get the ability to be on the floor. Like, and yeah, bro, and no wonder Paul
This is
Pierce and,
funny.
Kevin, and
Yeah.
KG are like that because.
Oh, my bad. I think I pulled it
Oh
down.
no, yeah, we clicked on it at the same time. Like, dude, Kevin Garnett is a top 3, top 4 power forward to ever play the game. Ray Allen's one of the greatest shooters to ever do it. Rondo was ridiculous. Paul Pierce, but man, like you would think these dudes just ran through the league for a decade plus.
And Isaiah Joe, I mean, I know I try not to harp on this because Isaiah Joe was an end of the roster guy, and he finally got his chance in OKC. This dude shot over league average for 3-point percentage. Like, he was getting up threes in OKC, pushing them towards the playoffs. So just looking, that's just an example, right? Paul Reed's another example of a guy that just didn't get enough burn early. If Doc Rivers was coming back this season, do we think that Jalen McDaniels would even consider coming back to this team? Right.
Like,
no. These are the things that I'm looking at.
And I don't want to hear it as like, we defended this dude all season long.
We did.
Maybe for the last 2 seasons, to be honest.
Somehow we bought in and fell for it. Maybe it's just because the Sixers had enough talent on the team.
I think he definitely because he deserved his credit throughout the year, and he deserved his credit when it was due. When other fans just didn't want to give it to him because they were the ultimate, Doc haters.
Yeah.
However, he deserves his blame, and the big problem about this podcast was that he takes none of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting to the point, no accountability, which we knew the whole time. He just laid it out for us on a big ass plate in this podcast and rubbed it in our face. Like, I'm not accountable for anything that happened the last 3 years. I wanted to point out as well, because you mentioned about Joel, and he basically said it like this too about him and his teammates. Joel needs to love his teammates back. They love the MVP. He needs to love his teammates back. And it's funny, man, because he talks about Joel needs to go bowling, I guess, or go to the movies on a Friday night with the team on the road, whatever. Does Jokic do that? I mean, I don't know what
Jokic doesn't want to go to the parade.
He doesn't even want to go to the fucking parade. He wants to go back to Serbia. And we're talking about teammates and bonding? That's not what matters. It's about what you put on the court.
Kawhi Leonard
Doc
is
Rivers
a mute robot.
Major issue, man.
Kawhi Leonard is a mute robot with an AI laugh and won a goddamn title.
Well, I'm not hearing that.
Draymond Green,
not hearing that.
Draymond Green knocked out his own teammate. But Joel doesn't bond enough.
He doesn't love his teammates back.
And here's the most ironic part about it. When Joel won MVP this season, whose decision was it to put the entire team behind him in the camera because it was about them as well?
These are the things that get forgotten. These are the things that get forgotten, man.
And when he's crying with his hands, with his face in his hands, and his teammates are, patting him on the back and going nuts for him. I guess that relationship is just, it's pretty bad, right, Doc? Not your relationship with the guys. Your relationship with the guys is, you're good.
Right. You're beefing with the number 2 star of the team, but Joel needs to love his team.
Kobe. Jordan was the biggest asshole you would probably ever meet. Hell, I know he hasn't won a title, but Jimmy Butler has ripped every teammate he's ever had. Been to 2 finals appearances. Now choked in this recent one, but been to 2 finals appearances.
To be fair, Kawhi hasn't finished downloading emotional. Yeah, that's fair, man. He's such an awkward, just weird individual, man. And Doc can never take responsibility for his bad coaching. I mean, right on the head.
Well, and that's my point about how we defended him. It's we defended him because we felt he deserved credit when credit was due. However, when it's time to take some of that blame on the chin, a nice dose of accountability, how do you?
Bro, he was talking about the Game 7, right? And after the Game 6 crumble, and Joel just wasn't finding his spots. He wasn't going to the ball. And James Harden, he's older now. He can't finish the way.
I wish I had him when he was younger. No shit.
I wish when he was younger.
Yeah, player. No shit. You wish you had him younger.
What the hell are you talking about, man? And then it gets to Game 7, and he's like, "Yeah, we came out firing." And then at the end of that second quarter, Joel and James, nothing was falling. They couldn't get anything going, and you're just not going to win like that. And it's like, dude, you're not a bystander. You're not a fan watching the game. Like, that's us. We are the ones that don't have any input or effect on the game. Doc Rivers is standing on the sidelines like, man, my guys aren't bringing it tonight. I guess we're going to lose this. You know what I mean? Like, shit, we don't have it tonight. Like, another round two exit.
Oh,
right?
I don't know.
Like, what type of locker room was this?
He's over on the side. What you going to do? I don't know.
Right? Like, timeout. Like, guys.
Yeah.
Guys.
I don't control who's on the floor. I don't control.
Guys, we got to hit shots. Like yeah, we got to get open shots.
I get it. It's especially in today's NBA, but it's always been this way. When it comes to the NBA, it is a players' league. Like, coaching matters. Obviously, we're screaming about it right now.
Yeah.
But it is more of a players' league. So there are going to be times where a James Harden might go off script and might not want to listen and defer in a game plan. But it's very simple to me. If what Doc Rivers is essentially alluding to is the fact that him and James didn't see eye to eye on how he should be playing and what should be ran, and James kind of did his own thing on the floor, how about you take James off the floor then, coach? Like, I don't care if this is AAU or the NBA finals. If you don't listen to the coach multiple times, and like, if one possession Doc called something out and James Sauce didn't want to do it and did some, whatever, we'll talk about it in the huddle. But if James Harden was just not listening, James Harden was just playing this ISO, pound the ball through the floor, and Doc wanted something completely different.
Yeah.
Take him out of the game, you lunatic. That's in your job description. You have that authority on who steps on the floor and who doesn't.
Yeah. Even if it's just,
but I guess that wasn't an option.
Even if it's just to sit him down for a few minutes and talk to him. What's going on? What are you seeing out there? Why do you feel you need to do this? What can we do to meet in the middle? Like, that's how you have a relationship with your players. You have to meet them in the middle and talk to them about the game and their thoughts.
Just maybe you don't know everything, Doc.
Maybe Harden sees something that you don't, Doc, because he's on the court. And let's be honest, Harden is a better player than Doc ever was, right? He's a smarter player than Doc ever was. Like, these are the things I'm thinking about.
Here's the funniest thing to me, Scotty.
Yeah.
He talks about Harden's style of play and how, he doesn't view that as how they were going to get to a championship and win a championship. Like, was Harden's style of play okay when in game 1 and 4? Like, was that okay? Like, to me, Harden's style of play never changed in the postseason.
Really,
it was just the shot making wasn't there in the bad games. The bad games, he was 2 for 14. He was 3 for 18. Like, that's not him playing any different. It's just he wasn't shooting well from 3. He wasn't finishing at the rim compared to games 1 and 4. You know what I mean? Like, Doc's sitting here as if, like,
I agree.
Oh, well, games 1 and 4 were great, but in the other games, he didn't do what I wanted him to do.
Why is it that the last few seasons, right? It's been now it's turned into Harden was hard to work with, not going to win championship. Ben Simmons, he didn't know if he was a point guard that he could win a championship with. So what is the play style that you need a point guard? Because Ben Simmons presents
totally different guys.
Defensive perimeter defense, right? He's a great defender, rebounder, can push the fast break. He's a great facilitator. Okay. Then you have Harden, who is different. He scores the ball, right? He's a scorer. He can get guys involved. He's an even better passer. He's not the typical defender that Ben Simmons was. So these are two different point guards, and they're both semi-prototypical for this day and age and this era of basketball, and they're not the right thing for Doc to win championship basketball. It doesn't make sense, and it's funny. I saw Marshawn Lynch's comment here. Surprised he didn't say it was a scheduled loss for Game 7.
Yeah.
That's funny because in the podcast, he says, Game 6 was it. That was our chance. And it's funny as a head coach, you say
mindset, coach.
So what are you going into Game 7 with the mindset of? How hard are you coaching these guys?
You loser.
If Game 6 was it, that was it,
dude. I hate.
Maybe it was a scheduled loss for Doc
now, man.
And
this is just the funniest part. It's so hypocritical, bro. Like, Bill Simmons, like, obviously, if you're Bill Simmons and you host a podcast, you'll have anybody on, especially, if it'll draw views and clicks. Like, but like, he had a lot of things to say about Doc Rivers over the years.
Yeah.
Disparaging things to say about Doc Rivers over the years. But come on, coach.
Come on. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question before we get to our Would You Rather segment of this Wednesday show, Scotty. Obviously, we've talked about this interview for the last 25 minutes in a negative tone, and rightfully so. So, like, I'm not sure how much of the James Harden comment I should take seriously. But does any of that comment make you weary of make you even more weary of bringing James Harden back? Is there a voice in the back of your head that listens to that and here's the challenging part and the style of ball James wants to play, and then you think about Embiid and Maxey and Nick Nurse and moving forward, and if that's just James, if James can't change his stripes, are they really going to get closer to a championship? Or can he? Or do you have belief that with Nick Nurse, he can play a different style of basketball and play, meet in the middle to, in some sense?
Yeah, I do think the way I would put it is I've kind of taken my foot off Harden's neck a good bit after hearing this interview, because what it tells me is the type of personality that Doc Rivers was going into these situations with. And it just feels like a clashing personality. If you have any beliefs in the way the game should be played that oppose Doc Rivers, you're going to get shut down. And I think that could lead you to what we saw from James late in that postseason in Game 6 and Game 7, where he's kind of mopey and just kind of it seemed like he was over it, right? Now, that's not a good look on his end. You would still want him to go out there and keep competing his hardest, even if you don't like the head coach. So that's not a good look. But what I would say is, with Nick Nurse, I feel like he is a better communicator. I feel like he's a better listener. I think he's more willing to try new things and different things. So I think that it could work better with Nick Nurse in a sense. Now, they've had their talks, Harden and Nick Nurse. They met very early on in the process of him getting hired as head coach. And they said, from Nick Nurse's point of view, he said he's had great talks with James Harden.
Yeah.
He says he's one of the smartest guys that he's ever talked to.
I mean, I think that part's key is the starting point, right? Like the fact that Harden's not literally a Sixer right now.
And he's still meeting with Sixers brass.
Well, it's that, but it's also, hey, like when him and Nurse talk, I'm sure Nurse talks about his philosophies and what he would like out of Harden and like this team to do moving forward. And it's like, you don't have to come back. So if you come back, you better be able to adjust and play to how I want this to be ran.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
And
you can go back somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's fair, man. At the end of the day, James Harden, he will have to adjust his play a good bit, I would say. At the end of the day, if you're not hitting your shot, I don't think he should be permitted to take 18 shots on that given night, right? If he doesn't start hot. Because the thing with Harden throughout the playoffs is you could kind of tell how the game was going to go for him very early on. It's not he could play himself out of a bad groove. It would only get worse throughout the game whenever he starts bad. So I think in those games, those are the games where you look at Embiid, you look at Tyrese Maxey, you look at any other players that you add into the mix this offseason, and you say, hey, guys, I don't think Harden's got it tonight. This is your night to step up, be the guy tonight if you got it. And I think that's just the adjustment that has to be made. And I think that comes from better coaching, man. Like we talked about shortly after the postseason crumble for the Sixers, next regular season, the only goal should be getting guys experience, getting guys their shots on the floor and getting them comfortable as we approach the postseason so that they're ready to go. And I think Nick Nurse will do a much better job of that. I think James Harden has to be willing to adjust to that. What I would ultimately say, just to wrap up my portion of this Doc Rivers talk, Brett asked, would Popovich throw all of his players?
Would you ask Pop that question? Remember that one?
Right. Would you ask Pop that question? That's when we all really saw the lack of accountability, his
lack of self-awareness,
the lack of the arrogance of him. You're not Greg Popovich, brother. Like, you have not won, 3-4 NBA championships with the San Antonio Spurs with the same core. you had a core that was the level of that Spurs team when you had Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, and you did not win 3 championships with that roster.
No.
So you are not Greg Popovich, and Greg Popovich would not do that. And that's why Doc Rivers, at the very end of this, you look back, he should have been fired after the first season, man. Probably should have never been hired. I know back then when I looked at the signing of Doc Rivers, I thought maybe he can change something. I fooled myself into it. I didn't listen to what people were saying from the Clippers, from even the Celtics fans that talked about Doc Rivers. I didn't listen. That was my fault. I tried to believe in this team, and Doc Rivers was a major issue.
We
downplayed it a little bit after the season just because they kind of, they did fight through things this year.
Well, that's what I was about to say. He got
all right this year,
got
but
the excuses at the end of the season. The first year, the first collapse against Atlanta was the whole Ben Simmons thing, and now you're really looking forward to you're looking to move on from Ben Simmons. Let's see what Doc can do with a point guard that is willing to shoot the ball and yada yada. He spends half the season, handicapped. They're still winning games. They trade for James. They get to the postseason. Joel breaks his face. James isn't 100% healthy. Let's see what they can do with a full season together. Well, now you got a full season together. And you dealt with injuries, and you dealt with another Joel postseason injury. At the end of the day, this was the final straw. This was the last, kind of the last line that Doc had to hit, and nothing changed. They couldn't get past the second round.
This reminded me of another thing he said, because I believe Bill Simmons asked him, like, who would be the perfect guy to pair with Maxey and Embiid. He said a guard, a big guard, right, that can score the ball and facilitate. Said like Manu Ginobili. It's funny. James Harden is 6'5". He's a bigger guard, right? He's a thicker guard. He's a great facilitator. He led the league in assists this year. He's left-handed, so he's very similar to Manu Ginobili.
You just don't have James Harden at that point of his career anymore. Like, you don't have that, I don't want to say
that is your big guard, though,
right? Because
I agree. Your big guard too, right? Like, those are the guys that you're describing, and he just couldn't figure that out. But nonetheless, he's gone. Thank goodness.
It's pretty funny, man. It's pretty funny, and it is a breath of fresh air that Nick Nurse is now the head coach, because he's done a couple different podcasts and interviews now, and when just the difference in them two speaking, it's like, okay, well, the grass is going to be greener.
You almost think like Brett Brown, like, man, we could have just kept him for 3 more years and probably had the same thing, if not better, right? Maybe he builds these bonds further and develops these guys. I don't know. I know his time was up too, but it's just funny to basically look back, and we still have the same question marks that we had, man. Is Joel the guy? Can this team get over the hump? Tobias Harris contract, which guard are you disappointed in this year, right? Like, it's just the same story that you went into the 3-year span with Doc, talking about culture, losing culture. You exit it talking about Nick Nurse needing to build a different culture. So it's interesting, man.
Woo-hoo! Speaking of,
great question, Marshawn.
Our next segment here on Wednesday, Would You Rather Wednesdays. And speaking of Bill Simmons and Bradley Beal, Bill Simmons joined, I believe, was he on WIP or was he just on his own podcast?
It was his own podcast.
It was his own podcast. He put the Philadelphia 76ers as the odds-on favorite. He said he would put them at minus 200 to acquire Bradley Beal this offseason, who has a no trade clause there in Washington, but Washington is more than headed into a retool or rebuild type of situation there. Beal's contract, yes, the numbers and the production as of late might look worse than Tobias Harris to some Sixers fans, but he is the feature of our Would You Rather Wednesday. So let me pop this off right now. And essentially what we mean is take the contract out of it. We're not talking, I don't want to eat this for the player, because it seems, Scotty, like a lot of Sixers fans are still so down on that Game 7 against Boston that they've forgotten that Joel still is an MVP and Joel still brings you your best opportunity over the next couple of years to bring a championship to this city. So what can you do? Who can you bring in to maximize Joel Embiid's window to try to win a championship? And I think Bradley Beal is one of those players that can do so. But a lot of Sixers fans are out on it. They don't want him, they don't want the money. But I'm saying take the money away from it. Take the years away from it. Just let's talk about the player, because it still seems like some people forget that Bradley Beal ain't a 24-point per game scorer on over 50% shooting. Even last year, quote unquote, one of his worst years. 2 years ago and the year before that, he averaged 30 plus in those 2 years. He's played on a horrible Wizards team for the last couple of years. So let's get into our Would You Rather Wednesday edition. And yeah, man, he apparently, according to Bill Simmons, he was Joel's choice before they brought in Harden.
Yeah, I remember. I remember the smoke coming out around that time, and some people say even last year at the trade deadline, this past season, if Bradley Beal doesn't break his hand, do the Sixers try to make a move for him mid-season this year? So,
and I need before we do this, I need Sixers fans to understand why. Yes, it can be possible for him to be moved for just Tobias Harris and draft picks. Maybe Tobias Harris. Hear me out here, Scotty. Jaden Springer. I know a lot of Sixers fans don't want to give up Jaden Springer for Bradley Beal. Yeah, I'm moving Jaden Springer on for Bradley Beal with Tobias Harris. Yeah. It's not going to take much because Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. Yeah. And if he waives it and says, Philly, I want out, and you're sending me to Philly, because that's the type of league it is now, what makes you think Washington has any sense of leverage where they can start the conversation with a guy like Tyrese Maxey, where they can force a DeAnthony Melton or someone like that out of a Sixers uniform? Although, if it was asked for Melton and Harris, I would probably do it still. Like, DeAnthony Melton's not going to be the stopping point for me. But that's my point. For all the people that, why would Washington do this? Because he can waive his no trade clause and force his way out of there. Yeah, I agree, Brett. Anyone not named these two can be moved on.
Yeah, I think, it's funny, and I'm glad you brought it up just regarding Sixers fans in general, because it's funny, the discourse around Bradley Beal right now.
Yeah, man, that's my biggest thing.
As if beggars can be choosers. We are trying to figure out things on the fly here. And if James Harden, if he walks, especially if he walks, I would consider doing it even if James Harden comes back, because I think it's a good fit even with James Harden back. But if he walks especially, you have to pivot. You have to make something happen to fill that void to an extent. I think Bradley Beal is more than a reasonable option. I get the inflated contract, but guess what? That's what we're going into. This is life. This is what stars are going to get paid. Some are going to be hit or miss when those contracts hit. We're going to find out, but Bradley Beal fits the script. You're talking about a guy that averaged 23 points. Let me put it this way. How many seasons have Sixers fans begged for Tobias Harris to be traded? If I told you that Tobias Harris...
They want him traded for just role players, which so do I, but
if I told you that Tobias Harris would give you 23 points next year, 5 or 6 rebounds, 5 assists per game, shoot 50% from the field, and shoot 37% from the three-point line, would you take that from Tobias Harris?
Can I ask you a question? Would you take that from James Harden?
Yes. So to put it in a frame of reference, this was a down season for Bradley Beal, mind you. 23 points. You talked about it.
It was, Scotty, but here's the most ironic thing. His field goal percentage and 3-point percentage
are the best in his career.
We're way up from those 30 and 31 point per game seasons just a few short years ago.
The field goal percentage is the best in his career, above 50%. So, yes, the volume went down, which he's trying to get his teammates more involved. It's clear what he was trying to do in Washington, right? Give the reins to Kuzma a little bit more. Let them play with the ball. I think that's something that the Sixers need, a guy that's willing to do that, because guess what? He's not scoring 30 points next to Embiid either, right?
I'll tell you, he's probably scoring more than 23. If Bradley Beal came here, I think Bradley Beal could give you 26 efficiently.
Yeah, I agree.
25 efficiently.
Especially if Harden is gone, right? Like if Harden's gone, 26 is more than
Yeah.
reasonable.
No,
But
and
besides Joel Embiid,
here's
it's
why
gonna
I
be
brought
so
up
much
Harden, because
easier.
I loved your point, because obviously we're talking about trading Tobias for Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, well, you would get this from him. But we kind of talked about that fourth option. So are you expecting 23 points per game from your fourth option? I'm saying James Harden gave you what this year? Yeah, I know the assist totals are going to be different, but James Harden gave you what? 21 point something, 22 per game?
21 points, little over 10 assists per game.
And he shot
Close to 6 rebounds.
44% from the floor. James Harden, Scotty, has never shot 50% from the floor in a season. James Harden shot 38.5% from three last year. Bradley Beal shot 36.5% from three last year.
This right here, man. And we can talk about it now, right? Levine's on the screen with Bradley Beal. That's what we're doing today. Would you rather Wednesday, Bradley Beal edition, because there's been a lot of slander thrown around about Bradley Beal's name. And ultimately, this is a realistic option for the Sixers to obtain Bradley Beal this offseason for
He
Tobias
has
Harris.
to waive it. That is
the mock trade that I drew up was the one that you had mentioned towards the end there. D-Melt and Tobias Harris, and it's something that I'm willing to do. Honestly, I love D-Melt. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but you got to give them some type of net positive in a sense to get Bradley Beal from the Wizards. So I'll give them D-Melt, who they can maybe extend into the future, right? And you give them Tobias Harris, who expires at the end of the season and clears out a max slot for them. So I think that is more than a reasonable deal. You talked about the no trade clause. That's what it takes. He has to want to play with Embiid. We know how that goes. But the GM that the Wizards just got, I've read a lot about this Michael Winger guy. He comes from the Clippers, had a relationship with Tobias there. He is the guy that ultimately traded him to Philly as well. So keep that in mind. But all of his talk is about rebuilding the Wizards and doing it the right way. He's not going to sign Kristaps Porzingis, Kyle Kuzma back.
No.
Those guys are gone. Bradley Beal is the next one up. You're not going
that's why
to
to Bill Simmons' point,
which
you got to take it with a grain of salt here. But to Bill Simmons' point about just the money, that could be enticing enough for Washington without a DeAnthony Melton or something, because it's like, all right, well, you're going towards a straight rebuild. You're not bringing back Kuzma or Porzingis. What is the future of this team? You look at Beal's contract and you get to say, wow, I get to swap this with Tobias Harris for less on 1 year. At the end of the year, I can restart. That could be enticing enough for them. But let's get into our first player here. Would you rather Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine, Scotty?
This one's interesting, man. We can start right from the top. You look at Zach LaVine, 24.8 points per game last year, so around 25 points. 4.5 rebounds per game, 4.2 assists per game, shot 48.5% from the field, 37.5% from the three-point line. I do like Brett's point here. You talk about 42% on 8 shots, 37% on 7 shots, 39% on 7 shots. So the volume shooting from the three-point line is definitely something that you would be interested in here. You look at Zach LaVine, he's 28 years old. Bradley Beal's 29 years old. Bradley Beal only played 50 games last year. LaVine played 77. So there's a lot of things that point to LaVine here. My only thing to combat LaVine would be this. You're looking for a guy that at the end of games can take over a game, close out a game, become a number one in that moment. Don't need him to be a number one all the time, right? And maybe that wasn't working out on the Wizards. But you talk about, from a prototypical standpoint, guys that can close games, mid-range jump shot. That's something that Bradley Beal excels in. That's something that we were begging James Harden to take during the postseason, right? Every game that James Harden got started early with the mid-range in those games, they're wide open whenever you're working with Embiid, by the way. He went off in those games, right? Whenever he got it going from the mid-range. That's something that Bradley Beal can do. I think he would be working with a lot more space on the Sixers than what he would be working with in Washington and what he was working with. So I'm going to go with Bradley Beal in this scenario just because I know where Bradley Beal can go. I think LaVine last season, he had the better season, if we're being honest. I think he had the better season overall. He played more games. But I do like Beal being able to raise his ceiling a little bit more than Zach LaVine, in my opinion. I think this is fair, Brett. But at the same time, LaVine has never even had one of those series like we saw a few years ago from Bradley Beal when he averaged 30 points per game against the Sixers. Yes, the Wizards lost in 5 games, I believe. He still averaged 30 points in that series against.
They also made the playoffs more recently than the Bulls as well.
And yeah, so he's played in the playoffs. I get it. We're talking about guys that are not proven in the playoffs. That's it's simple. That's the simple way.
Oh yeah,
nobody's going to be available that has.
Most of these guys are just scorers within the 20 to 25 point per game kind of area that we have paired up against Bradley Beal, and it's basically to say like, I feel like we did this because of all of the outcry about Bradley Beal coming to Philadelphia and people kind of forgetting what kind of scorer he can be. But I would agree with you, man. I would go with Bradley Beal as well. Again, I just think like Zach LaVine is a very nice player. Zach LaVine shoots more volume from 3, and he still shoots a very high percentage of it. But Bradley Beal is just a better scorer.
Yeah.
And I think Bradley Beal obviously has to stay healthy, and, you know, he is only 29. I know people want to act like he's this expiring, you know, old contract. He's 29 years old. He's just been injured a lot. I would take Bradley Beal's scoring ability over a lot of different guys in this league, and Zach LaVine's one of them. Yeah. No, it's a great point, man. I'm with Bradley Beal as well.
Throughout his career as well, right? He's
played
a lot of different roles.
Very similar type of player here, Scotty. Would you rather Bradley Beal or CJ McCollum?
This one's interesting because CJ McCollum is maybe a guy that comes with less money. I know we're not thinking about contract, but that's just the benefits of CJ McCollum here. 20.9 points per game last season with New Orleans, 4.4 rebounds per game, 5.7 assists per game. So he gets involved in facilitating just as much as Bradley Beal. 43.7% from the field. 38.9% from the three-point line. He's 31 years old, played 75 games last year, so played quite a few more games than Bradley Beal. But yeah, I'm taking Bradley Beal in this case, simply because he's the younger product, and once again, he has the higher ceiling. If I think that the Sixers can unlock something in any of these guys, right? What do they look like with Embiid next to them on the court? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying CJ McCollum wouldn't be able to play next to Embiid. I think it would be
I think it'd be a good fit.
Yeah. I just like Bradley Beal more. I like his ceiling. I like where he can take his game next to Embiid. He's going to get a lot of open shots, a lot of open lanes to the rack, and he's younger, simply, right? We've seen Bradley Beal once again be the number one. CJ McCollum has really not been the number one. No, even in New Orleans, it's Brandon Ingram, right? When Brandon Ingram plays, he's the number one.
And if Zion's healthy,
he's the number one. So, yeah, I'm good on CJ McCollum. I would take Bradley Beal in this situation.
I agree, man. And I got to be honest with you. The more we're sitting here talking about it and realizing that he is only 29, I know the contract seems rough. I'm starting to fall in love with the idea of him and Joel together. Yeah. And I'm like, man, like Daryl, let's get something done, man. But we'll see. But I would take Bradley Beal over CJ McCollum as well. Bradley Beal or DeJounte Murray. Again, take away age, take away money. The player. Who would you rather right now today?
This one's the toughest one for me so far because this is where I start to think about Tyrese Maxey, and I start to think about what is yeah, that's a funny comment about Zion. It's interesting because I start thinking about Tyrese Maxey and how DeJounte Murray would balance the backcourt.
Nah, don't think about that. Don't think about that.
I have to.
Just the player. No, just the player, because this is to prove that, like, where Bradley Beal still ranks against the rest of the league to Sixers fans. So don't worry so much about like I know we're talking fit with Embiid, but don't worry about like Maxey and stuff like that. I'm trying to prove like, don't be so down on Bradley Beal because he's still better than X, Y, or Z, or right there with X, Y, or Z. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's hard for me to keep that out of
I
my
know
head
it's
when I'm
hard to
comparing.
differentiate and take away from it. Yeah.
Because these guys provide two different things in a sense, right?
Right.
Murray provides the perimeter defense. He's lengthy, gets in passing lanes. He shot 34.4% from the three-point line last year, 46.4% from the field, 20.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists per game. This one's tough. This is probably the toughest one for me so far. And I'm just trying to think about ceilings but you can't think about the Sixers in a sense. Which player am I taking right now? I think I have to take Bradley Beal still. He's the more polished product. He knows what he's stepping on the court to do in a sense. Not to say that DeJounte Murray doesn't, or that DeJounte Murray isn't a quality player. He's a very good player. I'm just thinking about what can I get the most out of? Who can I get the most out of? If I put it in that frame of mind, not just the Sixers, but who, when they have their big game, is the better player. Right. And then you got to take it down to consistency as well.
Mary's interesting because of the size and athleticism and the defensive aspect, as well as being a really good scorer. The 34% from three, below league average, that bothers me. As a pure scorer, again, this is why I'm doing this with Bradley Beal specifically today, because people are forgetting, man, he is one of the best scorers in the league.
Yeah.
That's what he does. He puts the ball in the hole. I would take Bradley Beal right now today over DeJounte Murray. Again, strip away the money, strip away the age, the contract, the injuries, everything like that. The player today, who would you rather have on your team? I would rather have Bradley Beal than DeJounte Murray.
And I think, just to once again give a little more perspective, I think DeJounte Murray would cost you more, honestly.
To get, absolutely. And again, if you want to talk fit with our Sixers, Bradley Beal's a better fit. DeJounte, you're going to rip your hair out if DeJounte Murray shoots 32% from three. It's not going to work like that. So I know Beal's not some 40% three-point shooter, but he's still league average. So that's what I would say there. Oh, a little interesting one. Because they've both been rumored to Philly so far. Would you rather Bradley Beal or Fred VanVleet? I'll make this one quick and simple. This is not to take away the fact that the Sixers do sign Fred VanVleet. I'll be very happy, but I would take Bradley Beal.
Fred VanVleet, he does bring the championship experience. He obviously won with Nick Nurse up in Toronto.
I would be very happy if the Sixers
has that connection with Nick Nurse as well, right? So he knows how Nick Nurse likes to play and how he likes to push his guys. Averaged about 20 points last year, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, shot 39% from the field, 34% from the three-point line. He's 29 years old as well, so same age as Bradley Beal. It's Bradley Beal. It's an easy decision here. You talk about Beal and VanVleet. They're both not the biggest guards, but Bradley Beal is taller, bigger than Fred VanVleet simply, so makes him less of a liability on defense, I would say. But I do like the tenacity from Fred VanVleet. I like what he could add from a
I'm not trying to diminish, I'm not trying to diminish the future prospect of Bradley Beal coming to Philadelphia and following Nick Nurse. I will be a happy Sixers fan if they were to bring him in. I think he's still a very good player. I think those shooting numbers are skewed from last year. I think he can shoot the ball much better than 39% from the floor. However, if we're talking would you rather, I agree with you. It's Bradley Beal, and it's pretty simple. Moving on to the next one. Would you rather Bradley Beal or Anthony Simons, Scotty? You got to take away the age and the price.
This one's interesting, man. This one's interesting because I love Anthony Simons, and I love the
very good young player.
I love the idea of him on the Sixers, man. 21 points per game, 2 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game, 44% from the field, 37% from the three-point line. very similar percentages there, right? From the two
Yeah.
scorers, you would say. Man. Something's pulling me to Anthony Simons, man, in this one. I think they're very similar player types in a sense. Both of these guys are scorers. Both of these guys can light it up. I think Anthony Simons appeals to me because he can get really, really hot from the three-point line. He is a really, really good long-distance shooter. And, there's just games that I saw him take over last year where I think he has room to grow. I don't think 21 points per game is like his ceiling. I think he's going to get up to that 25, 26 point per game level in the right situation. So I don't know. This one is tight. I'm not going to say it's a landslide that I go with Anthony Simons. I think there is a little bit of bias just in my belief of Anthony Simons and where his game can go.
I think in the back of our minds, the age definitely plays a factor as well, even if we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. And he just got paid in Portland, but it's not a crazy contract. I'm pretty sure
it's not.
It's $100 million or slightly less or something like that from Portland. So all that's in the back of your mind. Although I would still take Bradley Beal today, right now, over Anthony Simons.
To your point, I think I have, because we took Bradley Beal over Zach LaVine, for example.
Right.
So it's like Anthony Simons, Zach LaVine, and take it to that standpoint. Zach LaVine averaged 25 points per game last year, shot 37% from three.
And I agree with you. I think there's definitely room for Simons to grow. I think he's going to be more than a 20, 21 point per game scorer. And definitely has that capability, especially if he was, had the ball more than Dame. But I think Bradley Beal can still be a 30-point per game scorer.
Like he's already that. Beal is already that, right? He's already shown that he can do that.
Exactly. So. And again, I know for some reason we had this idea of Bradley Beal that he's like 33 years old and always injured. He's under 30. He's almost the same age as Joel Embiid. So
there's people telling me on Twitter they would take 4 more years of Harden over 4 years of Bradley Beal. Interesting enough. So 30.
If you want to talk 2 years of Harden versus 4 years of Beal, I think that's a little more balanced conversation in terms of Sixers' future. But even then, it's still. The more I'm thinking about Bradley Beal. Remember before? All right, hold on. We'll wait for this. We'll wait for that. This one's very simple to me. You threw him in the conversation, his teammate. I mean, it's Bradley Beal. Would I take Kyle Kuzma as a role player on this team? Yeah. But this isn't close. It's Bradley Beal.
This one's interesting to me, man. Really? I think it is close for me, just because. Well, if you take the Sixers side out of it, if you take the fit perspective out of it, then it's Bradley Beal, the player. What intrigues me about Kyle Kuzma is I think of him in the Tobias role specifically at the 3 guard.
Yeah, that's fair.
Or the 3, not the 3 guard, but the 3, the small forward position. And I think he would be perfect. I think he brings size, he brings rebounding, which the Sixers need. He also has a little bit of facilitating. Shot 33% from the 3-point line last year, though. So you'd like to see that a little bit better. 45%.
I feel like that's just because he shot such a high volume on a
shot a lot. Yeah. He averaged 21 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. He's 27 years old. So that's where you have to factor all of those things in for it to make sense. But even then, there is an argument about fit versus these two guys on the Sixers. I'll take Beal, of course, player to player. Fit, it's interesting because it's like, can Kyle Kuzma be better on the Sixers around the better players? But same thing with Bradley Beal, right? Yeah. Like, is he better with the Sixers? Is he better with Embiid as an anchor defensively behind him? I'm going to take Beal. But Kyle Kuzma's an interesting prospect, right? Can you throw something in the deal where you can get Beal and Kyle Kuzma? I don't know. That's asking a lot,
right?
But nonetheless, I would take Beal still.
It's interesting you say that, Brett, because Bradley Beal or DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, this one's interesting, man, because you got DeMar DeRozan. 24.5 points per game last year, 4 4.6 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, shot 50% from the field, averaged 1 steal per game, 32.4% from the three-point line, although he obviously doesn't shoot many of them.
I'm taking Bradley Beal if you just want me to get that out there right now. And here's again, I just think Bradley Beal is a better scorer. DeMar DeRozan does not shoot the 3 ball, and if he does, he doesn't shoot it at a high clip, high percentage. DeMar DeRozan is this mid-range god, right? He's Mr. Knockdown. Well, he shot the same field goal percentage as Bradley Beal did last year on a down year to most people, right? Bradley Beal, to me, again, maybe on Friday's show, we can just compile all of the scores in the NBA and kind of rank where we would put him, because I'm starting to think that Bradley Beal can score the basketball a lot better than a lot of guys in this league.
This one's interesting, man. DeMar DeRozan.
Very good player. Very, very, very good player. However, I will say, again, we're stripping everything away, and it's just who would you rather. So answer that part. But if you wanted to factor in the Sixers' point of view, I don't think DeMar DeRozan's a good fit at all next to Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation for me, is like the fit with the Sixers that really turns me off, because the thing that's appealing about DeMar DeRozan, he has his spots just like Beal has his spots, right? Like Beal gets to a certain spot on the floor and you know that's a bucket. It's the same thing with DeMar DeRozan. You ask yourself, who has been the better player throughout their career so far, right? And
I would say DeMar DeRozan's probably been the better player throughout their careers. I guess maybe I'm just putting too much into who I want to score the basketball, because maybe that's what I'm arguing.
How you want the basketball scored.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I got you. And I think it's hard to not factor in the fit with the Sixers, because that's what
it is. It's in the back of your mind the whole time.
Yeah, like that's like the easy way to just simply nullify DeMar DeRozan in this conversation.
Right.
And then you think about age. That's the other way you can nullify DeMar DeRozan, because he's 33. Is he going to get better next year? Probably not. Is he going to give you the same production next year? I don't know, right? Whereas Bradley Beal, is he going to get better? That's a question mark. Is he going to get better than 23 points per game that he had this past season? That's a question mark. There is a reality where this is the downside of Beal's career. It happens. Like, I'm not saying that that's the case. I don't believe that that's the case, but it happens. But who has the more realistic opportunity to increase their output next season and be a better player? I would say it's Bradley Beal in this case.
I agree. No, we don't have Dame on this list. I think he's just too much of a star to put kind of in this conversation. I would take Dame in a heartbeat. Scotty, I know you would text me Kyrie. If you strip everything away, the off the court stuff, I would take Kyrie in a heartbeat. Trae Young, I sent to you. I think we would both take Trae Young in that sense. So there is a tier that we're kind of lumping Bradley Beal in, but I still think it's a very good fit. I believe this is the last one, and it makes perfect sense, because for the 76ers to wrap up this discussion, would you rather Bradley Beal or James Harden? And as we were kind of working through this would you rather segment, we brought up, 4 years of Harden, 4 years of Beal, 2 years of Harden, 4 years of Beal. And while part of me wants to say I would take 2 years of Harden over 4 years of Bradley Beal, I think I would. But I'm also, again, talking through the segment with you, highly, highly intrigued. Again, we always say different doesn't always equal better, but I'm very intrigued in the difference here. I'm very intrigued to see Bradley Beal next to Joel Embiid and how the offense would look. Because, man, as I'm working through this offseason, I just don't know how consistent James can be for you going forward. And that's my fear. Yeah, no,
I tend to agree with you. That's been the conversation for me, right? Like, that's been what I brought to you a couple times this since the offseason has started for the Sixers. is there a world where you don't get the 40 points games in the playoffs, right? Game 1 and game 5
Right.
or game 4 they don't happen, right? But maybe you get 20 to 25 points per game
efficiently
in the other games and in game 1 and game 4, and you're able to win some of those other games in the mix, right? And
right,
I
like
think
the
that's
Sixers
what we have to
don't
have
win. The Sixers don't win game 1 without Harden doing that. Obviously, they didn't have Embiid. He needed to put up 45, but they probably win 2 of the other games if he does that. If he does 20 to 25, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm honestly going back to look because part of this conversation, and we can't help but bring this to the Sixers with these two, right? Like this is what this is about. I was looking back at Fred VanVleet, his numbers the year that the Sixers, or excuse me, the year that the Raptors won the championship. And I'm just thinking of guards. Let me look up Kyle Lowry as well, because Fred VanVleet, he had about 6 assists that season per game. I want to look up Kyle Lowry's numbers that year. The reason I'm looking these numbers up is ultimately because I look at James Harden and it's like, what is the best thing that James Harden brings to this team? And it's his facilitation, right? It's the 10 plus assists per game. Like that's what you want out of James Harden. Run your offense, get guys in the right spots, right?
It's almost like the scoring, which sounds nuts because he's one of the greatest to ever put the ball in the hole. It's almost like the scoring is an added bonus now.
Yeah, exactly. Like that is not what he is.
And that comes from inconsistency. That's what that stems from as a fan for me. It stems from him being so inconsistent on a night-to-night basis shooting the ball that I don't know what I'm going to get. So the night I see the ball actually go through the hoop, I'm like, oh wow, this is great. This is star James Harden. But then 48 hours later, I get 2 for 15.
Yeah.
And that's my fear moving forward.
Because, see, I think, like you said, you get the 2 for 15. What does Harden bring to the team? Facilitation, running an offense, being the point guard. You think about Nick Nurse and his system, and what do you need in a Nick Nurse offense? Do you need a maestro like James Harden that gets the bulk of the assists? I don't think that you need that. I think that Tyrese Maxey can get up to around 4 or 5 assists per game, right? That will be your Fred VanVleet on that championship roster. 4 or 5 assists per game. Joel Embiid averaged 4 or 5 assists per game last season.
Beal averages 5 assists per game.
Beal averages 5 to 6 assists.
So if that was your backcourt would be averaging 10, 11 assists per game.
Exactly. So I'm thinking you can contribute to facilitation, getting other guys involved, moving the ball around, and that will get you your assists regardless, whether you have James Harden pounding the rock or not. So when I think of that, what do I need from that second player, that second star on the team? And it's scoring. It's scoring in the big moments, in the late games, right? Late of games. You need a guard that can get to a spot or get to the free throw line and get you a bucket. That's Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal is better at that than James Harden right now.
Right now. Yeah.
Not over their careers. We know James Harden is the better player.
That's what I'm leaning towards. And it's crazy because the people out there or the Sixers fans that are going to call us nuts for this are the same ones that were hounding James Harden in the postseason and want him out of here. And that's what I'm thinking about as well. It's the duo of the two. It's the complementary basketball of the two compared to James. Man, this is rough because it's almost like I'm talking myself out of James Harden with such an unknown. And like, we don't even know if this Bill Simmons rumor has anything to it. Like this could mean nothing. This isn't a thought on Daryl Morey's radar. Bradley Beal ain't leaving. And I'm sitting over here as a Sixers fan who, if he comes back, I need James Harden to wind back to change his game in a sense. Yeah. And I'm almost talking myself out of him at this point. It's going to be an interesting offseason, man.
Yeah. I think this comment is interesting because I feel like some of the disdain towards Bradley Beal is that I've heard people say, it's redundant between Bradley Beal and Tyrese Maxey, maybe that's not a bad thing to have two guys that can get you buckets at your guard spot.
Right.
Like
And
walking buckets.
Like here's my question too. Maybe it's redundant. But why would we want to run it back with what you get from?
Isn't that redundant?
Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's redundant, we don't want that because it's redundant, but we want James because he can give you 2 for 15. I don't know. I'm not out. So he does have a no trade clause. Shelley, you brought that up earlier.
I wonder why we think this way.
Right.
Why
he has to waive the no trade clause and point to Philly because of the relationship with Joel. If that happens, he's a Sixer. And it's not going to take a lot.
Why wouldn't he do that? Right? Like, you look at the other options around the league. Who could trade for Bradley Beal, right? You could look at the Celtics and say, are they going to trade Jaylen Brown for Bradley Beal? No. I wouldn't do that if I'm the Boston Celtics personally. But nonetheless, if they do that, so be it. I think that they would be a worse team without Jaylen Brown and having Bradley Beal. That's a conversation for another day, though. Portland. They want to trade for Bradley Beal to pair him with Dame, right? Portland? Why would Bradley Beal want to go to Portland?
You also just paid Anthony Simons, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why would he want to go to Portland instead of Philadelphia, right? Remember how we talked about Doc's comments with Joel needing to love his teammates more and be more outgoing?
Hey, Joel, I need you to send Bradley Beal some love.
I think it's it's interesting the way we think, because I know we think of Tobias Harris in most situations as like a negative asset. But I think when you're talking about the Wizards and where they're at, it's almost a positive asset when you're thinking about getting Beal off the books.
It is.
That is going to turn into $50 million on the books for the Wizards next year that are going to be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They need to rebuild. They need to start over.
That's the enticing part for them.
Maybe you buy him out even, right? Maybe you buy Tobias Harris out and you go and you tank this season, whatever the Wizards want to do there. But either way, you get a max slot opening at the end of next year.
That's why I laugh when people are like, why would Washington do this? It doesn't start until he waives his no trade clause and says, I want to go here.
Yeah.
So, and once he does that,
do that.
Once he does that, it's good night, Irene, to Washington. Because we know how this league works. When a player, like you don't have the leverage when that player says, I want out and I want to go to X. Also, it's enticing enough because of what Scotty just said. The money you get out of 4 or 5 years of Bradley Beal turning into $50 million when you're in a complete and utter rebuild.
Yeah.
You're not re-signing Kuzma or Porzingis. This team is going to be bad, dude.
Yeah.
So what would you rather have? 1 year of Tobias Harris at $38 million or whatever, or the Bradley Beal contract if you're Washington.
Yeah.
And that's the enticing part. And if you can get a couple second-round picks with it or, whatever.
And the final thing from, the Sixers perspective, just to flip it back to the other side, for all the people that are just like, I don't want Bradley Beal, I don't want that contract. You want the max slot opening next summer, right? You want that max slot opening. Who are you going after next summer?
That's what I'm saying, man. Listen.
Who is the free agent next summer that is better than Bradley Beal? Klay Thompson? He's 35. He's going to be 35 years old.
I want to say one thing to Sixers fans.
Chris Middleton?
One thing to Sixers fans, okay?
Come on.
We could talk contracts because we can talk ages and years and, we talk James Harden contract. We don't want 4 years for James Harden because at that point of his career, we don't want to watch that basketball. When you're talking money, the money aspect of it, I struggle with it myself, but I need all of you to do me a favor. Shut up. It's not our money.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like
the years win or not?
If you the years aspect of a contract can matter to you because, like we said, you're worried about the future of the team and blah blah blah. They always find ways to move money and make this. It's not your. It's in baseball. You gave it. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's not your bank account.
Yeah. And I think it's a lot different thinking about a Harden at age 37, 38.
The age,
versus
the age
Beal,
and the years of a contract definitely
32, 33.
can be talked about because, like you said, would you rather have James Harden at age 35 or 36 or Bradley Beal at age 32?
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're talking about. But when we're talking dollars, they're both going to be making around 50
they're
million.
both going to get a max slot, right?
So
that's the reality of the situation.
Bradley Beal at 30 or James Harden at what James Harden is right now.
Yeah.
They both Bradley Beal has injury concerns right now.
And
doesn't James Harden?
Man, the crazy part is like, and Bill Simmons talked about it. Mind you, I don't agree with Bill Simmons.
That's what I'm saying. You got to take it with a grain of salt. We have no idea how much of this is even in the realm of possibility.
He talks about it, and he even mentions that he thinks that Bradley Beal would be a better fit with the Sixers.
That's what I'm leaning towards, man. And that's something that a lot of people don't agree with, but I would love to have the conversation as to why. Because those same people that don't agree 3 weeks ago were freaking out about how bad James Harden is.
Yeah.
And if you think Bradley Beal is just, so bad and so much worse, you haven't been paying attention. All you're looking at is injury history and a lot of money. That's what you're looking at. Because if you want to talk production and numbers, just go look at them. Go look at them. He shot a career high in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage and averaged more than James Harden did on a very bad team last year. He's been on a bad team almost his entire career. He's averaged 30 before, just 3 years ago. Like, you haven't been paying attention if you think Bradley Beal is some old, washed-up player on a very bad contract. You just haven't been watching.
It's lazy, man. It's honestly lazy to act like you're so down on Bradley Beal because all that they're seeing is literally dropped from 30 points to 23 in the last 2 years. That's the only reason that this dialogue is happening around Bradley Beal. The truth is he decreased volume. His assists went up. Means he's trying to get his teammates involved
his
more.
Efficiency went up.
Super max player. He understands that he's not going to win by himself. So he tries to get his teammates more involved. He takes less shots, shoots more efficiently.
Even that drop is more than what James Harden averaged.
James Harden, like it
way more efficient shooting. So what are we talking about here? You're right. It's lazy, bro. It is. Yeah. Well, he went from 30 to 23. He's getting older. He's injured.
Who in the Sixers fan base has watched Wizards games this past season?
Right. We have. It's just not like we have. We haven't watched a ton. Like, you know what I mean? But it's like, just do a little bit of research into what Bradley Beal still is. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as a Sixers fan. But they won't do that.
Beggars can't be choosers, man.
Yeah.
If we could go out and select any second star for Embiid, sure.
Exactly.
We would pick better players than Bradley Beal.
Go to game 6. What did the Sixers need with a 2-point lead with 4 minutes left at home in game 6?
Needed a goddamn bucket.
Okay. Who didn't deliver that? James Harden.
We know, yeah.
Okay. Well, again, I feel like I just totally talked myself out of a James Harden reunion, even though I think it's happening and it's going to be
when it comes to Bradley Beal, I think you could feel that way in a sense. I think that's reasonable. Like, I don't see why it wouldn't be. Yep. We took a while on this segment, man.
I know.
That was crazy. That was crazy. We went ham on that because we were supposed to talk about the Phillies today.
Yeah, real quick, just 2 minutes before we wrap up here, man. I know you got to get off. The Phillies have split the first 2 in Arizona with the Diamondbacks. 15-3 last night, Scotty. The bats are booming to start June. And then they lost by a score of 9-8 the night prior when JT Realmuto puts the ghost of David Bell to bed by hitting for the cycle. He also walked, so JT was just ridiculous. And he was ridiculous last night as well. But JT Realmuto hits for the cycle. Won a few Phillies to do it. Did you know he actually hit for the cycle on different pitches every time? So like his home run, he hit a changeup. His double, his triple, he hit a fastball. His double, he hit a slider, and his single, he hit a curveball. So that was pretty cool. He's the only player to ever do that as well. Cody Clemens, I don't know if I was going to text you about it, but then I realized it went foul. Cody Clemens misses the foul pole by 2 inches to take that would have given the Phillies the lead with 2 outs and 2 strikes in the top of the 9th. They lose that game, man. And the only frustrating part to come out of the 2 games is Dombrowski and Topper, I need you guys to be better. Like, not only is a bullpen game every 5 days inexcusable again. Yes, I know Andrew Painter's here for everybody out there. It's a GM's job to not sit on his hands when injuries happen and to make the team better, okay? Yeah. So I'm not asking for a blockbuster trade for a 5th starter. I'm asking for something serviceable as your 5th starter, okay? Call somebody up. I don't care. But so you get Strom, which is fine. Like, that Strom started for them early in the year. If Strom's your starter, fine. But Dombrowski and Topper, what in the actual fuck did I see thrown on the field on Monday night? Junior Marte throwing 2 innings with his 7 ERA. Dylan, they're non-MLB arms, Scotty. Dylan Covey comes in. Oh my God, he tries to throw him for over 2 innings. Then one more guy came in. I'm forgetting his name now, but
Vasquez, Hoffman.
Hoffman, there it is. Hoffman, Vasquez is borderline MLB. And here's what I don't understand. This is my point. It made me so frustrated because not only did you have a 4-run lead in this ball game, you were up 5-1. You were only down by 2 or 1 runs from the 6th inning, 7th inning on, and you continue to throw non-MLB arms out there when you told us that the bullpen was all ready to go. Like, Soto was available. Sir Anthony was available. Alvarado was available. Kimbrel was available, apparently. So why did you just punt on this bullpen game?
Yeah. It's weird.
You lost by 1 run. You had a 5-1 lead, and you just decided non-MLB guy, non-MLB guy, non-MLB guy. Fortunately for Topper and for Dombrowski's, roster construction currently, the Phillies bats woke up last night, and Zach Wheeler dealt through 6 innings. 15-3 win for the Titans. I got to tell you, man, even with that negative, that weird loss on Monday night, you still feel good about this team. I'm almost at the point where, like, it feels like they could take 3 of 4 right now.
Yeah.
Ranger on the bump tonight. Knowles gets to start on Thursday afternoon in Arizona. We'll see what the Phillies can do over the next 2. They at least have to split. They're in pretty good position to do so, but winning the next 2 would be humongous. Guys, come hang out with us on Friday morning live here on DSM Media's YouTube channel exclusively. We will be starting our new segment, Eagle a Day, for the rest of the summer, starting up until the start of the 2023-2024 NFL season for our Birds. We will be picking 1 Eagle per show and giving you our expectations and predictions for him this upcoming season. So we'll be starting that Friday. Sixers wish list will continue as well. So come hang out with us Friday morning live at 8 a.m. For myself, for Scotty, for DSM Media, for our friends over at Manscaped. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Go Titans.
And Philadelphia